this next demonstration we're going to do is actually SYN flooding. What I've done is I've created an actual compiler box, as you see the name of it. I've set up reverse video so it highlights everything I type to hopefully make it easier to see, because this is a very limited Linux distribution that I've installed here. I like to call it my little lightweight. It's like a business card distribution. It's that size. It's very small. And I set up. So what we want to do is we're going to actually do a SYN flood. So if we go to our well, we'll do it against our Server 2003 machine. That'll work. So we've got Wireshark here. So I'll start my Wireshark capture again, because always remember you want to start your captures and see what the tools are doing. So we're just going to do a capture, interfaces, and start our capture on our ETH0 interface. Okay? We also want a command prompt, so we'll open our command prompt shell and get our fonts and everything set up so it's easier to see. Do our colors, background white, screen text blue, font, and then select it. Well, we better make that white. So screen background white, screen text blue. There we go. Now we can see what we got here. So what we're going to do is, if I actually do a cd ... and then I do a netstat-an, this shows me the state on this machine. So as you see, I've got a bunch of sockets in listening state, in FTP service, and we're all listening. So everything's good so far. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to flood, in this case, port 80 or 21, either one, probably 21. I'm going to flood it with SYN packets, so synchronize. So in a SYN flood attack, I don't complete the three-way handshake. So I've got a really old tool here. I mentioned it in the slides. It's called Sync4. It's by CRA. So if I look at the code, and I just do a real quick more on sync4.c. This is actually the SYN flooded by Zakith, right? So this is actually the same type of thing we talked about. And what it does is it SYN floods by sending an actual SYN to the port that we tell it to. So now if I do, what we like about hackers is if I do /sync4, it tells us how to use it. Says source IP is 0, random address will be used. That sounds good. We like a random address. So all we got to do is ./sync4, source IP, destination IP, the low port, and then the high port. So we can flood a range of ports. So let's see how it works. So if we do ./sync4, source IP is going to be a 0. We want random. The destination is going to be our target we've picked on a couple of times. And we're going to start with port 21 since we know it's open, and we'll go up to port 80. Okay? Now, if my syntax is right and everything's correct, it's going to start sending out some packets. So as you see, it's sending packets, and that's what it's doing. It's actually sending packets out to the target. So let's see what we've got on Wireshark. So if we go into our Wireshark display, you see on Wireshark we have the box is already getting slow because of all the packets. See how we have all these SYN packets coming into the actual box? If we go here, and now in the netstat, right? And so we're flooding the actual box with SYN packets. But what happens is, because the newer boxes kind of ignore it, it takes a long time to crash the newest box. But there it is, virtual memory minimum too low. So what we're going to do is this box will eventually crash when we set this up. So when we do our netstat, it's getting slower and slower. But you see, it's a little bit different today because the modern day operating systems know this is not a good thing to have all these open connections. But you see here is, it's still going to crash the box eventually. So we'll actually switch and go over to our Windows XP box, and we'll do our, and again, the boxes are running slow. Why? Because we're doing a denial of service. When you do a denial of service, that's why we said in red team hacking, unless we're doing stress testing, we normally won't do a denial of service, because by doing a denial of service, we're doing what? We're denying service. So now what we do is we go and we look at, we're going to look at our netstat on, well, first let's do an actual IP config. And the poor little boxes are all getting flooded by the SYN flood packets being sent out by that little tool. And this tool's old, like 1997, but it still hammers these boxes pretty good. So this is box 133. So if we go back over here to our SYN flood tool in our Debian box, let's kill it. Let's change this to 133. Okay? So now what we're going to do is send a bunch of packets at that XP box. So now we go over to the XP box, and we do a netstat -an. See how you have now SYN receives? Remember, Server 2003 wasn't allowing the half-open connection to remain. But as you see here, Windows XP does. So we have all these half-open connections, and these are the source addresses. That look like a real source address to anybody? A 0.160.130.147? In a good environment, this should never get through. But our job as a red team hacker is to try all these different types of techniques and see what works. So what happens is, if I continue to do netstats, the SYN receives a drop off because of the modern day. Older operating systems actually will fill up the entire queue with the SYN receives. But we shouldn't be seeing these 0 ports. By seeing these 0 ports, that shows you that there's not proper ingress or inbound filtering being controlled, because a 0 shouldn't be there. We shouldn't have an IP address that starts with a 0. Everybody agree? Hopefully. And we can continue, and the SYN receives are getting larger. Plus, I didn't check what ports are open on here. Maybe there's ports that's not open that it's going to. 25 is open. There's SYN receives, so we're getting more and more. So eventually, we fill up the queues, and so many come, they actually crash. Different things you can do. So this gives you an idea of what we can do with a little tool like Sync4. So we will go ahead and break Sync4. And these are some little programs that I've set up. We got overflow and the format string error and those types of things. So it gives you an idea of how to create your environment. This box, as I said, is called the compiler box. That's because I needed a C compiler when I was doing some development. So I set up a quick Debian Linux distribution, got a C compiler on it, a GCC, and now I can compile and build code as I'm doing my testing. Remember, this is part of the process we have to do as red team members. We have to build some code. We have to hack around a little bit in programming and scripting, and it's good to do that with a test lab and build your own range, as we'll discuss later. And this concludes the demonstration of the Sync4 SYN flood denial of service tool.